Now, starting us off here, this has got to be my favorite color combination using the pale moss. This is pale moss with polished tuff and stripped spruce wood. I think that all these tones go really well together, and the polished tuff next to the pale moss carpets especially looks so good. There's so many like complementing colors in each of these blocks. They just blend very nicely together. Definitely my favorite combination of those colors. But I also tried experimenting a little bit with some other colors, and I couldn't really find any others that I loved. There are definitely some uses next to stuff like the trapdoors. There's of course entire wood families that you can use these with, but I just wanted to kind of test these out here and get an idea of what they look like against some of the trapdoors, especially some of the ones that have like holes in the middle. I think there is some utility here, but they definitely look best against like the dark oak, the pale oak, and the spruce, the ones that are actually full. But I think there is some utility here even in the open ones. And within the same vein of experimenting, you'll notice the pale moss carpets are actually a little bit taller than a half of a block. And so that made me question, could we use snow layers to actually cheat the system? And if we see that's about where the pale moss was ending, if we try and get ourselves a taller version here, you'll just see it doesn't really work. Even if we add a few more layers on top of it before it's actually a full block, it's still just not going to work. But the second we pass that layer and get ourselves a full block, there we go. We get a too tall variant. I think it's a little bit unfortunate that we can't utilize the too tall version in a few more places, but honestly, I think having it fixed to only 2 tall spaces is just fine. It's not the end of the world. But moving on from that, I also discovered a little bit in the technical applications for this block. So before we get into experimenting with all the different details and designs and stuff that we could do with this, I found a neat little doorway that you can use. So if you were thinking this like a clue room or something like that, or like you're in a house and you're trying to solve a puzzle or something to get through a door, or you're on a map of some kind or something like that, this actually has a secret application. So from here, you can see we have a layer of the pale moss carpets, and behind that, the dark oak trap doors. And what you can do here is crouch up, and just barely you can flick that trap door, and it's kind of stuck in that position, so I can't move it at all. And you might be asking, well, yeah, that's cool, but what exactly can you do with that? And well, the thought behind it is maybe you could do a little bit of a one-way switch. So most of the times with doors like this, you'll just have like a random button or a lever somewhere, and this is a little bit more of a fun way to do it. So say we hide another lever somewhere else in the build, let's say like right here. We use this lever to open up a little gap in the wall, and well, it doesn't really look like there's another button for us to press, except right here, if we flick this trap door, it'll open the door. And then if I wanted to come through and close it again, I can't do that because it's a one-way switch. And I'm sure that there are plenty of other one-way switches. I just think this one is kind of cool. But yeah, just a tiny little redstone application. Now we're going to get into the actual design stuff, you know, the stuff within my wheelhouse. So starting off here, you can do some kind of a fancy like display case with a mob head or something like that. This is just an armor stand pushed into this block here with the pale moss on the edges and then the glass up there creating the display. Pretty simple, but it gives off a cool effect. I like it. I like it. Now moving back into the walls, there are plenty of different designs that you can do. Of course, I like the spruce and the polished stuff the best, but there are other color combinations that you can go with, and I think it looks really good paired with some darker tones like these darker tones in the glazed terracotta. I used this one very recently in an old western bank, and I think it looks really good. I really like this one. Now I also wanted to try experimenting a little bit with the back of the block, and I think this creates a very cool barred window approach. You can obviously do this with stuff like iron bars or something like that, but I think the pale moss gives off quite the cool effect. It kind of looks a bit overgrown, but not in the way that like vines would look. And overall, I think I might enjoy this more than having iron bars back here. Just as a little comparison, you can see it just doesn't quite do it the same way the pale moss does. Yeah, definitely prefer it that way. Now moving on, of course I had to do something funky. This is a face, and well, you can do a little bit of a stubble. If you're trying to do facial hair or something like that, yeah, you can do stubble now. So this is supposed to represent like his chin and the big old beard, and then like the stubble reaching up on his cheeks, and then the eyes up top. Yeah, yep, had to do it. Moving along, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the natural application of this block. You'll notice the sides of these carpets aren't actually the way that they look in vanilla Minecraft, and that is because I currently have a resource pack from Vanilla Tweaks that adds these sides to the pale moss and the regular moss carpets. Now I am a big fan of this overhang overhang. Moss carpets by themselves just look like regular old carpets. They don't actually feel like moss is supposed to feel. Moss is an organic growing plant, and it feels a lot more natural whenever you have it spreading over the sides of whatever block it's placed under. So I think this is definitely something that we need in vanilla, but that is not quite what I'm here to talk about in today's video. I just think this is really neat and it feels true to form. So if y'all enjoy that, go ahead and check out Vanilla Tweaks. I'll have a link down below to the resource packs that I use. So now if we take this unique side texture, combine it with the hanging moss, we can create something really unique. And this is especially unique because the hanging pale moss actually acts a lot differently than any of the other hanging variants. See, these ones you can't actually replace the block that they're on top of with the carpet. If I were to do this trick, you see it works here. No, no, and no. So it worked with the glowberry vines, but if we replace this one, you can see it works just fine. And if I load it without the resource pack, it doesn't look quite as good, but it still has a little bit of utility, especially from a distance. It just kind of looks like a cool like wisp or something. Like you could use this maybe in chimneys or something if you wanted to add like a three-dimensional smoke of some kind. I think there's some applications for it, but it definitely looks best with the resource pack on. Now moving on to a little bit more of the industrial builds. This could be a very good window for a building that you see from a distance. You could just barely see it in the windows there, but the pale moss is covering the light source that we have there and creating a very nice shaded window effect. Now, not only does it serve to dull the color of the frog light a little bit, but it also just creates a nice framed window feeling for it. And this is kind of like an alternative to using tinted glass or whatever to block the luminous of the light. I think this kind of works to cover up the light itself, but it also doesn't block too much of the light. So I think it's a nice little happy medium that we have here, but it definitely works better further away. Now over here, this is a simple like hedge wall design. And if you put the pale moss carpets out front, it kind of creates this graded feel within the bush itself, kind of making it seem that there's an actual fence throughout the bush instead of just on the top of it. This one's pretty subtle, but I definitely like it. I think it has a lot of applications. And a quick side note, I was experimenting with some vines, seeing if I could do anything cool with them. Unfortunately, you can't place the pale moss here and have the vines stretch up the side of it. The closest that you can get is having a transparent block in between, which is pretty unfortunate, but I think it still creates a kind of a cool effect. It kind of almost feels a lot more 3D than just having the vines flat against the surface, which, you know, it works in a way, but you know, it's definitely not the strongest application of this though. I wish you could just put it next to it, but I don't know why they didn't do that. Next up, and back to the cityscapes, we have this interesting window design. I'm not really sure what I'm going with here. It definitely looks very glitchy at the moment, but this is supposed to create the feeling of lots of windows. So not on like a normal Minecraft scale. If you were to scale this down and have this say as like a miniature building, this is supposed to try and help that feel. I think. I'm not really sure what I was going with in this example, but you know, it's here and it looks like something for sure. Not sure if I'm onto anything here, but you know, it's an idea and I felt like sharing it. Moving along though, we have this gigantic wall, and what the pale moss carpet can do is help bridge the gap between things like diorite and tuff. And it's incredibly easy to do because all you need to do is place a layer of the pale moss carpets at the beginning of your gradient and then just blend it up like you would normally. This of course isn't the best example. We could do this on a much bigger scale and you'd understand it a little bit better, but this is just a little bit of like a PSA, you know, hey, you can use this to help blend your gray blocks together with the white ones now. And this could really work with any color. If you were trying to blend it from a darker version to a lighter version, it could work with, you know, whatever, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, all of them. And then finally here we have this really cool ornate staircase. I really like this, and it does work, you know. We don't have any stairs here, but we can still ascend just fine, and that is using the walls under carpets trick, and it works perfectly with this little ornate design that the one tall pale moss gives us. Definitely going to consider using this anytime I want to build a castle now. But yeah, that just about does it. Only a handful of ideas today. Again, these videos are just kind of trying to get the ball rolling, trying to get ideas out there, and seeing if y'all have any ideas similar to this, seeing if we can brainstorm anything in the community off of my ideas. I'd love to hear if y'all have used this block yet. I have yet to use it in any serious regard, so I thought experimenting here today with this was pretty fun, and it definitely got my mind rolling and the ideas flowing. I especially like this one-way design. I think there's other ways to do this, but I haven't seen anyone use it this way, and I think it's a fun unique way to do this, and I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, but as always, ladies and gentlemen, people of all ages, I really appreciate you sticking around to this point of the video, and as always, I hope you all have a wonderful day.